morning, everyone. Good morning. What is today's lecture about? Uh, in the past couple of days, there were some case studies that we can pick up from newspapers, and they can be used in your answers at different levels. So we will be picking up two such case studies, and we will see how they are relevant for our answers. How many of you have anthropology optional? Sociology? Okay. So whether it is sociology or anthropology or even public administration, you can use this case studies as value addition in your answers. Not just these optionals, even in essay, ethics, especially in the recent trend, you would notice that in ethics papers, the questions are very application based. They're asking issue centric case studies. So, not just the part B, but also the part A. Let's say, for example, if you're taking a look at waste management, there is a ethical dimension behind that waste management. If you're talking about a particular community's participation, then that community's role in preserving that ecology, that can be one way of looking at environmental conservation. So here we are beginning these case studies as governance case studies, and then we are extrapolating it to different aspects of our syllabus. Okay, let's see what these case studies are. The first case study is about the Dongria Kondh. Okay, so firstly, for prelims, since these are asked from newspapers, you might have to know where the stripes are. Okay, whenever, see, I'm not giving an answer, I'm giving a structure on how to think. If you know how to think, you can go to Google, search, and find out your answers. So whenever an issue that is related to tribes is there in the news, the first question that you need to know is their location. Are they only present in one state? Are they distributed in different states? The second question that you need to know is, what is their culture like? One common trait of every tribe is that they are closely linked to their forest based living. Does that mean every tribe is there in only forests? Need not be. But those tribes which are closely linked to forests, if you remove that forest or that land away from them, you're basically taking away their entire livelihood, their entire culture, their entire existence. Because for centuries together, that is how they have always lived. So, to address this problem, we need to understand their lifestyle first. Okay? Whenever we're talking about anthropology or sociology, the difference in anthropology and sociology, if you have not considered any optional, anthropology is about the evolution of a cultural element. How culture is changing from time to time. Sound koncham. Am I audible enough? Koncham. Okay? Okay? Yeah. That is anthropology. But when you're talking about sociology, the contrast here is that in sociology, you are talking about an entire community, how different segments of that community are interacting with each other. How is that society organized? If a society is more complex, there will be a hierarchy within that society. So, for example, if you take the case of Indian society as a whole, the segmentation is based on caste as a hierarchy. And this segmentation, when it is there in a setup where there are severe resource constraints, it will lead to the problem of discrimination. So that is the subject of sociology. So when you understand this culture, when you understand this society, you can link it to governance. So in general studies, having this basic thought itself is good enough for you to know how to design governance policies. So this filtered understanding of the topic of different aspects of your optional can also be deployed in your governance structures. Okay. So the takeaway from this initial introduction of how to look at any governance case studies is to place the processes which can solve the problem within the domain of people-led change. So the whole point of this case studies is to discuss how by including people in your governance can actually lead to better outcomes. Okay? Or how respecting the rights of people can uphold the governance systems. The purpose of governance is welfare of people. And therefore, you cannot take people's participation away from governance. So this is the broad framework of thought. How do you apply this framework of thought in different subjects? This is what you're supposed to know from newspaper articles. Okay? The first one is about the Dongria Kondh. Where are they present? Odisha. So there is this company called Vedanta. Okay? And they wanted to carry out some mining activities in Niyamgiri hills of Odisha. This is where these tribes reside. And they have a certain culture. When they are present in certain geography, the characteristic feature of a tribe is to live in harmony with that entire geography. Whether it is the ecology of that region, they worship that local elements, right? So they treat the geography and the land that they live in with a sacred view. If you're taking that land away from them, it's like the glue that keeps them together. You take that away from them, the entire structure of their society collapses. And that's why, if you are reading anthropology, in paper 2 you would notice that land alienation is the first topic in tribal anthropology. You remove land from them and you are taking away their culture. What is the impact? This is what you have to study in that topic. Anyway, in general studies, here the whole case, I'll just sum up the case. What happened? Somewhere in 2000s, early 2000s, 2004, 2005, Vedanta wanted to start mining, but in 2010, the government denied a clearance. And Supreme Court said that the Gram Sabhas or the local people, without their consent, mining cannot happen. And therefore, it is considered a tribal victory. So, it's been like 10 years since that landmark event happened. And it is in that context, how they continue to preserve the ecology of that region and the culture of that region is protected. You can use this as a case study. It was there in Hindu newspaper like a couple of days ago, so that's the reason I'm picking it up. So what are the important points that you can note here? See, firstly, they are there in Odisha's Niyamgiri hills. What is the ecological identity? They carry out something called Podu cultivation. So if you get shifting cultivation. They move from one patch of land to another and they leave that patch of land for rejuvenation. So this is a method of sustainability. One of the major problems of modern day agriculture is that you continue to use the same piece of land without allowing it to get rejuvenated. You keep on adding artificial fertilizers, manures, etc., where the soil quality and the soil organic carbon, again SOC, this is something that we will read in environment. Whenever we get a environment current affairs class, we will take a look at it. All of this get disturbed. So you can again use this point of Podu cultivation as a local, local technique to preserve soil organic carbon. Now, what is the spiritual connection? Like I told you, tribes worship the local elements. Niyam Raja, since they are residing in a mountainous area, that Niyamgiri hills, they think or they worship that mountain itself as a deity. What is the cultural heritage of this people? There is a language called Kui, okay, and they have some unique traditions, like they have tattoos, etc. These cultural elements needs to be protected because they are endangered languages and endangered practices. Every cultural language is an expression. Language is an expression of a human thought. So when you are not preserving a language, you are essentially taking away the wisdom of that locality away from humanity. So you need to protect that language. So these are the basic points that you need to know for prelims exam. Okay? Where is the location? What is the kind of cultivation? What is the spiritual connection? What is the language of Dongria Kondh? So this can be the first level of points that you can pick up from that article. Next up. Now, the problem. What happens when mining barons come to that region? So this is also a classic case of economy versus ecology. What are the traditional elements of that society? They have, let's say for example, they have distinctive tattoos which give them an identity. They focus on nature-based ceremonies. Since the language doesn't have a proper script, they depend on oral traditions for furthering their cultural identity. Then you have all those local like aesthetics, like for example their jewelry or their ornaments or any souvenirs that they possess. They're based on forest-based products. So this is their traditional lifestyle. But what is happening with the modern day challenge is that forests are being cut down, increasing urbanization. And you can now see this as an element of social change. So in GS1, Indian society, within this, you will see social change as a very major theme. What are the factors that are contributing to the social change of the tribes? So these can be a general framework that is most probably true for any tribe. Urban influence, attire practices, generation gap, which also creates a culture gap, and developmental pressures, that is government trying to occupy the lands, etc., etc. These kind of modern day challenges are nearly universal for all parts of this country. For example, you may see that mobile phones penetration started in these regions, in the periphery of these regions. So this will bring us to the next question. What is the impact of technology on tribes? What is the impact of technology on society in general and tribes in specific? So the lifestyle of tribes is different from the lifestyle of common public. So the impact will also be different. But the methodology of using technology is same. Now, what is the legal framework for tribal rights? So this is something that you will see in polity. So I'm just giving you an example of how to use a single article and map it to different parts of the syllabus. So we are looking from GS1 society, we are moving to GS2. So whenever you look at any tribes issues, the first question you need to ask is, what are the constitutional provisions associated with this tribes? So you have this article 244, 275 and 342. You can just go through this. I'm not going to explain this because it will become a polity class. I'm just telling you how to use these articles. Okay. Then you have something called PESA Act, Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas. What is scheduled area? Okay. What is Schedule 5 and Schedule 6? This will be taught to you in your polity classes. Then you have in environment, you will notice something called Forest Rights Act. So this came on 13th December 2005. There is a landmark, this is a landmark law with respect to protecting the tribal rights. You will be learning this in environment legislations. Okay, environment basic classes. And then finally, you will be talking about the role of judiciary. See, we spoke about the concept of state. In a social contract between individuals and state, state is supposed to be a protector, right? That protection function of the state is done by judiciary. And where is it given? Constitution itself. So, constitution based protection is accorded to citizens of this country. Since tribes have more vulnerability, they are given more protection. Okay, that's all. So this is the methodology or the legal framework of tribal rights. This is how you are supposed to think. This is the basic case that I spoke about. In 2004 they decided, and in 2014 the project was cancelled completely. Now, what are the dimensions, other dimensions in which you can use this? See, there in GS3 there is this concept of inclusive growth. Okay, when I say inclusive, it also means including the tribes and the contribution they have for Indian society. The biggest contribution of tribes here is indigenous knowledge. See, they have a unique set of knowledge which is not probably documented and well researched. So if we don't preserve their culture, we are also at the risk of losing this ecological knowledge, because most of the times conservation activities are very much contingent on leveraging the knowledge of local population. So for example, if you want to write a point about sustainable agriculture, Podu cultivation can be one point. If you want to write about the medicinal wisdom or a lot of, see again, this can be linked to GS2 welfare part, and within that health. In that, one of the point can be this medicinal wisdom. And then water management. See, this can be linked to GS3. Okay, sustainable development. They have natural spring preservation techniques. They conserve their local water, right? So that can be used in GS3. And biodiversity protection, because of a concept called sacred groves. Okay, so you have seen this movie, Telugu movie Kaleja, wherein the protagonist of that story goes to a community in Rajasthan where they are not supposed to pick that flower, right? Because they consider it very sacred. So this concept of sacred groves, like there is this initiative of UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program. They use this element of religion as a tool for social conservation. Okay? There are certain programs. From time to time, the name of the program might change, but understand that for environmental conservation, religion can also be a tool. Now, we have moved from the first GS1, GS2, GS3 to GS4, ethical dimensions. So whenever we are talking about a tribal resistance, whether this is in GS1, modern India, even in British India, you will be talking about British resistance, tribal resistance against the British. Sorry. Okay. In that, you will see some common patterns. Tribals used to fight against the British. Why? Because they want to preserve their culture. There is this slogan for many tribal revolts, which can be common. I mean, it is associated with one tribal revolt, but that can be common for many other revolts as well. Jal, jungle, zameen. Water, forest, and land, which is very central to the identity of the tribals. So, whenever there is resistance, there is a justification behind it. Environmental ethics. Firstly, they treat nature as a very sacred entity but not a resource. So, this is something that we can learn from their lifestyle. Because nature-based solutions are the best solutions, which brings us back to the second point, collective integrity. See, when you have a collective integrity like a bargaining power, this is a hallmark of a participative democracy. This is a keyword. Participatory democracy. So, when you use this in GS2, the corresponding ethical logic behind it is collective integrity. Why should we have participatory democracy? Because that collective integrity will give us bargaining power to bring back that stability into that society. That is how you have to look at this. Now, intergenerational justice, another point. What do you mean by this? The way tribal societies survive is by preserving their identity and passing it on to next generation through their lifestyle. When land which is central to their lifestyle is taken away, that wisdom is taken away from that next generation. To preserve that intergenerational equity, they have this tribal resistance. So it is a justification in that angle also. Cultural relativism. So this is a term that you can take from anthropology. There is no right way of living and wrong way of living. When you are learning modern India, you will listen to a term called the white man's burden. It's a theory where the British had a sense of superiority. They believed that it is their personal mission to civilize the entire world and teach the world how to live. So, it's a very condescending view of other cultures. Like, you are very insulting. You are looking at others as a very inferior way of living. So, that will lead to conflict. When you are trying to justify the preservation of a identity from a cultural standpoint, this view of cultural relativism, that every culture is equally important in their own term, will help us frame policies in a better way, and the justification behind that is moving towards peace. So these are the ethical dimensions of a tribal resistance. So all these points can be used: environmental ethics, collective integrity, intergenerational justice, and cultural relativism. So we have seen how GS paper 1 can talk about tribal culture and identity as a salient feature of Indian society. Then you have seen how governance mechanisms can be used for social justice. We have seen environment and sustainable development angle in this case study. And finally, the environmental ethics. Just take a look at this prelims points. Now, let us move to the next case study, Kerala waste management. See, again, this is a governance study, case study. It is a case study of environment, waste management. It is also a case study of ethics. Okay. The common point between the first case study and the second case study is participation of people. Wherever participation of people is there, you will notice that the outcomes are much better than a top-down approach. What do you mean by top-down approach? You expect the government to do everything. For example, you have this Swachh Bharat mission. The government can educate the crowd, the government can place dustbins, but if no responsibility is given to the local population, the outcomes are not as great as what they can be. For example, you might be carrying a waste paper. It takes a lot of thought for us to go and put it in a dustbin. See, when before this Swachh Bharat mission, we might have had this habit of throwing litter on the road. Let's say you started eating an ice cream on a roadside, like you picked up that cone ice cream or something, and then there's this wrapper, and you want to put it in a dustbin. There's no dustbin, so you just throw it on the road because it is so normal in India. We treat our homes with such purity, but not the public spaces. So it took a lot of time for people to bring about that change. But what if they are made partners of this change? What will be the change in perspective and outcome? So this Kerala case study is a classic example where you can quote in essay, ethics, governance, GS3, waste management, etc. Let's see what this entire case study is all about. So there are two approaches to governance: top to bottom, meaning central government will tell what the state governments will do, and the bottom up approach, wherein the state government will just plan, but actual execution will be done by panchayat level, ward level, bottom to up. And in this bottom up approach, you will try to include people at all stages of program planning, execution. So the very design of policy will automatically include people. So why did Kerala want to bring about this waste management practice? Why is this governance policy like this? Firstly, like every city or every state, wherever there is urbanization, when the population is growing, they had this urban waste problem. So to deal with this urban waste, they wanted to come up with a new bottom-up approach, because the Swachh Bharat mission kind of a program where the policy measures are dictated from the top, they failed to bring about a positive change. It's not as effective as it was expected to be. And this is raising public health concerns because, firstly, Kerala has a very good disease surveillance network. Even during the time of COVID or latest news like Nipah or Zika virus, all of this, because of the strong surveillance systems they have had, they get detected quite early. Okay. And one of the major reason for spread of diseases is lack of clean environment. So you need to manage the waste better, and if you manage the waste better, the cost of managing health is much cheaper. Because imagine if you can just put a mosquito net and avoid malaria, you would rather do that than spend money on malaria treatment. So this is also about effective cost management, and when you include people in that, the cost will reduce even further, and also the outcomes are even better. So let's talk about the campaign called Vritti. So you have to use this kind of case studies in your answers to add value. If you're writing a mains answer, this is a kind of example that will really make a difference in your answers. What is this? Let us see. See, basically the campaign was launched on Gandhi Jayanti last year. Okay, even Gandhi ji advocated for a clean environment. Even the Swachh Bharat campaign was based on Gandhian ideology. So what is this? The whole funda of this campaign is to include different sections of the society: youth, women, corporates, old age people, wherever it is possible. All the sections of the society should be a part of this campaign. This is the whole point. So they had this Vritti Utsav, an event in Thiruvananthapuram, where 2000 people were participating in it. So that was the trigger basically of this case study. So the challenge that they were handling is, you have non-compostable waste. What do you mean by non-compostable? What is a compost? So any guess? There is something called biodegradable. See, our environment is such a beautiful design. Okay, when you take a look at the food chain concept, you will see that there are detrivores, meaning organisms which will try to consume the remnants of organic material. Let's say you throw a banana peel on the road. Do you think it will exist after a couple of days? It will just, be consumed by the microorganisms that are there in the soil. But when it comes to non-compostable material like say plastic or solid waste, how do you recycle them? That's the challenge, because they cannot be degraded through normal organic activity. So this campaign wanted to address this challenge of inducing a behavioral change in people, and they want to do it by including all sections of the society. The first component is including youth. So this part of the program is called Yuvadhara. Okay, so there are various departments within the state. So interministerial coordination. Okay, remember one thing, you don't have ministries at state level, you have departments. Okay, so these departments should coordinate with different sections of the society. For example, education ministry is best dealing with education at the central level, the policy matters. At the state level, you have a department of education which actually looks at the execution part. So if you want to mobilize, let's say, school students, the best place to go is probably Department of Education. Youth, women. So we will have to mobilize the government machinery of those respective departments and make them work together to achieve the end objective. So the component of youth, Yuvadhara, is about a decentralized developmental program. So what was happening in the state of Kerala is nearly 2.5 lakh people were mobilized for participating in these drives, and they were allowed to express their ideas. So there are concepts like hackathons, wherein the youth are allowed to present innovative ways of recycling and managing the waste. For example, you can see in this photo, wherein a giant octopus is created after you, by using the leftover waste materials. Okay, and the ownership of the assets that are created like this, say for example this is placed in a public park, for example I'm saying, if it's placed in a public park, does it belong to any one person? No, it's a community owned resource. So by design, if you put the ownership in on a community, there is no conflict. So everybody participates, everybody has a sense of belonging to that local community, and this sense of belonging is possible only if you are a resident of that locality. Let's say you are living in Ashok Nagar and you have a park near you. Let's say you are going to stay in this place for 1.5 years, 2 years. And if someone asks you to spend like a couple of days in making that place better, cleaner, and mobilize the UPSC aspirants to make that park cleaner, you guys are more likely to participate because you have that sense of awareness and a sense of responsibility to make things better. Similarly, if others also participate, the community sees a behavioral change. There's this movie Lage Raho Munna Bhai, like the second part of the Munna Bhai series, where Gandhian thought, or in Telugu you have this Shankar Zada Zindabad or some second part. In that, when you are trying to induce a change, let's say for example, there is a famous example in that movie. A neighbor is continuously, spitting that pan near their house, and every time the owner greets that person with a smile and just cleans it continuously. So at one point, the person who is spitting feels guilty and stops doing that. When you are made a participant in this change, you will feel guilty to spoil that environment, because you know, if the responsibility is placed on you, not on some other sanitation worker, you know that next day some of you should be the one who is cleaning that place. So to at least reduce your work, you will be keeping it clean. So there needs to be a civic responsibility for behavioral change, and that element is tapped. And this can happen at a very hyper local level. Let's say if you are staying in Ashok Nagar, and in High Tech City, if there is a park, will you take the responsibility of High Tech City Park when you are not even staying there? No. But a corporation worker, because of the fact that it is under the Greater Hyderabad municipality limits, they should take care of both these places equally. And they're also like human beings. Like, what is their motivation? They may or may not have the same level of motivation as most public. So it is important to take some sense of responsibility, because if people are not cooperating, the outcomes will be very minimal. This is the whole point. Now, Vruti program is trying to include this component of Yuvadhara. And how do they intersect? Because of the commonalities associated with the problem of waste management. Then you will see another section of the society, Harita Karma Sena, where women leaders are expected to go to every door. Segregated waste is collected and it is processed, and there is a public education campaign on how we should stop spreading this waste. When women are leveraged in this, they get to interact with other women in that locality, and this, as many sociologists and public policy makers observed, will induce a faster change when women are educated. Okay, so the Vritti campaign, Yuvadara, and Harita Karmasena. So these are like different verticals of the same problem, managing the same problem. What is the role of local self-government? Like I told you, without having a local government's role, it is difficult to bring about these changes. So ward level planning, mobilizing the people in that region, and processing the waste. The processing should also happen at the local level. You can't expect that the entire waste will be taken to some faraway landfill and it keeps on piling up. In areas like Ghaziabad, which is outside the Delhi like border, like outside outskirts, there's a huge mountain like landfill. Right beside that you have the beginning point of Greater Noida, where big cities, okay, so there are huge cities like when I say cities, like planned townships. Okay, so one real estate venture called Gore City, for example, which is a huge skyscrapers are there. Like you have shopping malls, residential complex, offices, everything in that one place. It's like a city in itself, and it's sitting right next to a huge landfill, just a few kilometers away, like maybe 10-15 kilometers away. How do you deal with this dichotomy, or how do you deal with this presence of a huge landfill, which is a mismanagement of waste, and right in just 10 kilometers distance you have this mega city where everything cosmopolitan, everything hi-fi, posh, they're coexisting. So it is like citizens of this country want good things, but if the responsibility is not bestowed upon them of seeking accountability, of seeking participation, I mean, they should be participants in this democracy, it will become difficult. Okay, so to improve the quality of life, like say for example you participate in community events like that, you get to know people around you, and you also have a new hobby, let's say keeping that park clean or something, usually the outcomes are much better. So just a quick revision. Harita Karmasena is about women, Vritti campaign, entire society, Yuvadara, youth, local self-governments by panchayats, resident associations, small colonies, they are also expected to show some accountability at their colony level. School networks, they will use teachers in schools at school level, and then there are corporates where you will see them collaborating with NGOs and municipalities to come up with technology based solutions for this waste management. So the whole funda that I'm trying to teach here is different sections of the society require a different policy design. This understanding, when it reflects in your answers, will make you score much more than others. Otherwise, what will happen? If you can't create this segmentation in your answer and write generic answers, let's say people participation should be there. I know people's participation should be there, but where, how, why? This clear segmentation, if it is not visually represented, if it is not driven by data, it is not driven by case studies, you are never going to clear this exam. I'm not trying to scare you. It is impossible to clear this exam without this value addition. Otherwise, you will have to keep on repeating. See, if someone tells you that, oh, it is not required to write this level of answers, just remember that roughly 13 lakh aspirants, give this application. Half of them write the exam. How many of you want only IAS and IPS? Almost everyone. And how many of you want to go to a desired state cadre? Are you okay with, let's say you're all from Telangana. How many of you are okay to go out of your comfort zone and probably work for the rest of your life in Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh? Let's say you get rank 79 or 80. you'd be very lucky to get into IAS. And even if you get into IAS, you are going to spend the rest of your life in those states. I'm not trying to put down those states. I'm telling you the public perception among aspirants, they do not want to work in harsh conditions like that. Maybe if people from those states want to work in there, they find it easier to adapt because of the cultural similarities. For people from other states, it can be a challenge to adapt. There are people who would want to work there. I'm not trying to uniformly say that every aspirant wants to avoid those states, but if you are not one of them, you better work on the quality of your answers. Unless you end up in top 50, or let's say you just hope that you are not in that 70 to 80 range or 90 range and enter into that 110 to 150 so that you get into IPS. This is the usual way of marking. Usual way of putting their options. IAS followed by IPS. Okay? Unless you are in either of these zones. For either of these zones, you need to have top-notch content. Do not normalize mediocrity. Do not normalize, an expectation. Just like we were talking about people's participation, this is your exam. If you are refusing to think, if you are refusing to do the hard work, and if you are expecting that everything shouldn't be spoon-fed, it's not going to happen. Okay? Why did I take time to explain this case studies? So over the past few days, we have seen different aspects of the syllabus and the orientation. We have seen how to read polity, we have seen how to read internal security, we have seen how to read case studies and governance. So we will be using, in the initial days of our orientation, these newspaper articles on how to study different newspapers, different aspects of the syllabus. The framework under which we have to study different parts of the syllabus. So today it was about the theme of governance and public participation. Two different case studies applied in two different contexts. But the common point is people participation. Is that clear? Finally, let us have a quick recap. Okay, one more thing that I forgot to take from that article is, one, you have Guruvayur, and then there is Kochi. Okay, this is slightly an exaggerated picture. Okay, Guruvayur follows a top-down approach. Guruvayur is a temple town in Kerala. So, there is less complexity. People residing there have a fixed pattern. So, it is easier to manage with a top-down approach by imposing rules, because the population that is coming there is floating. But in a complex city like Kochi, where urbanization will change over a period of time, over-reliance on the central collection systems never worked. So, you need to have that sense of judgment, where the top-down approach. See, top-down approach is easy to implement. Bottom-up approach is difficult because you have to mobilize a lot of people. But if the cause is above everything, if you want to achieve the cause, you need to have that discretion to decide which side to take. If you want to compare the Kerala model with the Swachh Bharat mission, just a quick revision. What is the approach? Top down and bottom up. What is the focus here? Creating infrastructure, that is toilets, taps, etc., etc. Here the focus is behavior change. It is not to say that here the focus is not on behavior change. Here also they wanted to induce that behavioral change. And the government thought that if we want to make the behavioral change of people stopping that open defecation, constructing the toilets is mandatory. But people are still not comfortable with the idea of having toilets in their home in various parts of this country. So the model did not change. Like just focusing on infrastructure and education is not enough. People did not have a sense of belonging, therefore the change becomes difficult. The opposite of that is start with behavioral change. When the behavior is changed, people themselves will demand the infrastructure. So this is the difference. Execution is through central agencies, and here it is through local citizens. So that is the importance of decentralization. 73rd and 74th Amendment Act. Polity. What is the metric to see if the change is their open defecation free status certification? Here, if you are trying to involve the community and build some community assets, those assets are the metrics for change. So, why did it work? Some statistics from the article. 73% of the women participated in this, and many local jobs were created through green employment opportunities, recycling and processing units. 100% of the strategy was based on the terrain. For example, Guruvayur and Kochi, for example, the contrast. Whatever model we picked was based on the geography of that region and the need of that region. So there is hyper local, multi-level planning, which worked for Kerala. And what are the ethical dimensions of waste management? So you need to talk about justice and equity. So justice means not just seeking something, but also giving. In polity, you have this concept of rights and duties, fundamental duties. These are not enforceable, these are enforceable. This is in law, this is in polity. But in ethics, it is always a two-way street. It can never be a one-way street. It can't be like you expect everything from the state and you don't have the ethics to give it back. That is fair distribution of waste burden. Duty of care. Government responsibility for public health. Let's say from a government standpoint, it should do its duty. Environmental justice. When health crisis comes up, most affected are the vulnerable communities. So we need to address that. And then there is this civic ethics, that is shared ownership of public spaces. Unless and until you have a community ownership of that public spaces, let's say parks, if the responsibility of that park is given to people, you will see better outcomes. So these are the ethical dimensions of waste management. Summing up, you can link this article to urbanization in GS1, and in GS2 you can link it to 73rd and 74th local governance. In GS3, sustainable urbanization, and in GS4 we have seen how we have to talk about shared responsibility, and there is this important concept of worker dignity. Treating sanitation workers with respect. So this is also one important component. These are the connections. So what are the from this entire case studies, what are the takeaways for aspirants? 1. People-centered models are the best governance models. 2. We have to respect our traditional wisdom. 3. If you take a rights-based approach, it is easier for people to demand accountability. For example, Forest Rights Act. For example, you have 73rd and 74th Amendment Act, where as a matter of right, the state governments can demand accountability from the center for funds, etc. Ethical leadership. Governance requires two important terms: moral courage and civic responsibility. This can be asked in part A of your ethics paper. Moral courage means, what is courage? Courage is not being just brave and not having any fear. Courage is that force which will allow you to move forward despite being scared. Okay. And what does the term moral courage means? You derive that strength to take that step forward because of the morality you have. Civic responsibility is a sense of a two-way communication between the individual and the state. So if you take up responsibility, you get your right. Without responsibility, in terms of ethics, you cannot ask for a right. Maybe in law you can ask, but not in ethics. Okay? So this is the framework of thought for dealing with our governance case studies. This is how you are supposed to do value addition. Clear? Okay, great. That's it for today.